Okay, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. First off, I think this is one of the first sessions, and obviously the first session today, so just welcome everybody here to the Data and AI Summit by Databricks. We're excited to be here and share a little bit more about elevating consumer loyalty in partnership with Amperity. We have Derek from Amperity here. He's going to pop up on the stage in a few minutes to talk a little bit about the solution and capability that Amperity helps us bring to life. My name is Aaron Shaffer. I lead Analytics Innovation at GM. Today we're going to tell you a bit of a story that is really focused on product with consumer centricity, sort of wrapped through a data-informed lens. And maybe the easiest way to sort of think about my background and my journey. I've been at GM for about 18 months. At previous time at Nike and Starbucks, and so I sort of come to this product lens or product focus with an interesting view of really being customer-centric and how we think about data. And we'll start to tell a little bit of a story here in three parts. Part one is let's understand the opportunity. Let's understand that product focus, that customer orientation, where data lives within that experience creation. Let's then go into capabilities that help us really drive success as far as amplifying loyalty and the opportunity that's there. And then we'll talk about a couple bright spots within that work that serve as sort of use cases. So that's how we'll get started today. As I mentioned, I've been at GM for about 18 months, and what really inspired me as someone that wanted to look at a new organization and join a team was really the focus of that organization. And for me, the amplification of zero crashes, zero congestion, and zero emissions is really important. It means something to me. It means something to future generations and my family, certainly, and something I can gravitate to and be excited about. I think another piece for me that really made GM important in the way I thought about the behaviors of an organization was a behavior that the organization has established called Think Customer. And as I look at thinking customer, I think about how data informs everything. And that starts at the supply chain level. It goes up to batteries, all the way through into how you think through the dealers, marketing, product, subscription, and everything else that sort of wraps itself around these experiences. If you look at the slide here, looking kind of from left to right, as the automobile evolves, the customer experience really remains at the heart of GM's success. And so, we'll take you back 120 years. 1904, GM's formed. 1908, GM has some new vehicles that have been brought to life. These vehicles are various body styles, including a touring car, a roadster, and a limousine. These are obviously customer need state inspired vehicles that led to product creation. Beyond this, a few years later, they had up to 22 different vehicles across 16 brands. So that just starts to think about how data is connected to consumer centricity related to how products were created. Let's fast forward to where we're at today. On the right-hand side, if you're looking at the screen, you can see the 2024 Lyriq. According to S&P, over the last year, it's one of the fastest-selling EVs. It's got great consumer centricity and how you think through. It's fully electric. It's got range of 314 miles. It's got various themes or modes that are designed for sport or luxury. And ultimately, it's got safety, hands-free driving, and driver assist within how you think through operating that vehicle. This sort of leads into the opportunity that we have at GM to drive to that evolution. And many of you here are well aware of the evolving expectations within data and AI. And we're here to talk about that as a summit, but we feel that in our own lives. As we think through our long-term growth and how we want to establish new ways of working, it's important to look at the current environment and how we're going to amplify and scale beyond that. And it really starts with evolving expectations. Each of us has expectations as consumers. They're heightened due to what is now easier than it was before. And an interesting perspective was recently announced by Fast Company. Fast Company identified the opportunity for the third space being it's not your home, it's not your work, it's another place that you spend time. And they identified an emerging theme within the third space, which is the auto. What's interesting about that is that typically before, this was community centers, this was libraries, this was cafes, but it's the convenience, the socialization, the connection, the relaxation that people feel within their autos that really makes it tantamount to their experiential days. A fun fact, I think it's 60% of the U.S. population actually names their vehicles. That just talks about the personalization and how people feel that excited about what they're going to be part of. As you think through the transformation within this evolution, many traditional companies have to really think through how to use data to drive forward. Easy examples on this end, right, that are probably folks that are here that could tell these stories far better. Disney started out in a small studio today, top streaming company across the ecosystem. AT&T started out in 1865, I believe. Small telephone company today, one of the largest 5G and broadband networks in the world. For us, transforming is obviously in what I showed in the previous slide, but it's also important when we think about the opportunity that we have within marketing. Today, if you're a marketer in the OEM or auto space, you have a very narrow window in which to capture a consumer. At any given point throughout a year, only about 5% of the U.S. population will be in market for a vehicle. What that means is that you take that narrow window, you pull away some brand loyalty from that, which is about 2.5% of that 5%, and there's a very small window in which you can sell features to someone who's in market or talk to them about other features they may want and bring them from an out-of-market customer into the market to drive a sale. And as we think through this, what this means for us is with cookies breaking down, with other areas in which we cannot understand customer demand, we have to go deeper into digital and start to receive the right signals and be more digital in terms of how we think about our advertising and spend. And then the last perspective here from a customer-centric focus is the evolution that we play as an organization. So if you think about maybe backing up a number of years, you had a lot of the customer experience really driven at the dealer, right? The dealer took your information, they had your registration, they had your financing information, they serviced your car. And then at some point in time, 10 to 12 years ago, we started to create these inroads with apps, with ecosystems inside infotainment, and other areas like subscriptions, where these things started to converse in distant ways and started to become much more cohesive as far as your end-to-end experience with multiple touch points. And so it's that customer centricity that's really going to be important as we think about the ecosystem we want to create to drive a best-in-class consumer experience. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we approach this, and then we'll turn it over to Derek to talk through the capabilities that we were driving through Amperity. But for us, this really starts with the opportunity to create a centralized customer view. Really, it's defining our customer. It's understanding the use cases that we might need to define the customer, and then broaden that out in ways to exemplify product and consumer together. For us, we have a great partnership with Azure and Databricks. We think about the scalability, the compostability, the governance of how this all comes to life. We've got important partners like Unity and MLflow that help us think through this in a way that can bring this all to life. So we've set up this platform that is really important as far as bringing the data into an ecosystem where it's scalable. But moving beyond that, we had to start to think about how do you decorate the customer with the right attributes and signals that really help them be notified for the right things and really help you as an organization drive consumer centricity. For us, this started out as a really wide problem. We had 150 different disparate data sources to start to look at. Obviously, if you're in this room and you play a part as a practitioner, you know that that's not scalable. And I think just to kind of combine this thinking with maybe how we viewed the customer before, we could certainly think about deduping through email, maybe through name or something else, but it wasn't additive. And if you added everything up from a program perspective across lots of different products that we had almost twice the U.S. population in terms of the number of customers that we thought about within our database. And that's a scary place to be. We knew that wasn't accurate. We knew that wasn't right. We could take some techniques and reduce that. But what we actually did was we really got smart about this 150 disparate data sources. We kind of distilled that down just to 13 different feeds. And we started to think about key unlocks for that. Amperity, through its stitch capability, is an important unlock for that. Downstream for that, you have the CDP, that's an activation unlock. But later today, Derek's going to talk about delta sharing, which is another important and safety compliant unlock. Other thing that kind of zips across everything here is the importance of data literacy and making sure that the folks who are the users of the data really understand the data in the right way. Once you sort of get to that place, you go back to a use case perspective and you layer on top insights and advanced analytics. And I think this is a place where you can start to get a stakeholder very excited about the opportunity that now that these data sets are all put together in a way that's meaningful and useful with the right terms and compliance can then be used in the right way. Easy ways to think about this, here you could layer segmentation on top and do some analysis, but basic descriptive analysis against LTV and churn models were really helpful to help us understand the consumer in a different way. Also, automobile end market was also another important aspect of this journey. Moving beyond that, what we want to do with this data set and the importance of where it sits is we want to build our own GM native targeting solution, which is work we started on. And we think about this as an agnostic place where data can kind of live within our consumer data hub, but be pushed out into any ecosystem. Amperity is part of our partnership there, thanks to their CDP-like capabilities, the UID 2.0. But we also think through how we deploy classic AI here. So whether that's gradient boosted models, maybe that's survivor models, we start kind of in the right easy mechanism there and build up for scale with more maturity within those modeling perspectives. And then lastly, we think about activation within all this work. And we have this quote at the bottom here by Mary Barra, who's the CEO and chair of General Motors, that talks about the definition of innovation is providing value to the customer. I think we think about that in the way that we're bringing this to life. But I also think innovation sometimes is really rewarded, but execution really sits out and that's cherished. And how we activate across a centralized customer view, driving partnerships really across the organization to distill down this kind of roadmap to execution at an endpoint is really important and critical for us. So I mentioned some of the capabilities that we're partnering with Amperity on to bring this to life. I'm going to ask Derek to come up and walk us through both a product overview and a quick demo on that.
Thank you, Aaron. And thank you in the back for getting the mics all sorted. I don't take any of that for granted. So I want to talk a little bit about Amperity. What is Amperity? Amperity is probably new to a lot of people in the room. Amperity is a company. I'm the CTO and co-founder. Amperity exists because everybody in the consumer space wants to have a unified view of customer, and nobody has one. That's sort of the short of it. And I think Aaron's illustration of General Motors kind of gives a pretty good clue as to why, right? 150 different data sources, more customer records than the population of the U.S. twice over, right? So just take 150 different data sources and a billion scale of records, and just stitch that all together into a customer 360. Like, that's hard. That's really, really hard. And so Amperity was founded, aimed pretty squarely at solving that problem. We launched about 7 years ago with our initial capability, which was an AI-powered identity resolution capability to help pull together those 150 data sources and those kind of billion scale records. And no, we couldn't do that 7 years ago. It's taken a few iterations on the model to be able to operate at that scale, but that's really the core problem area we started with. And we continued to innovate around AI because it turns out this is a hard problem. And it requires a more sophisticated approach than you can get in sort of classic data warehouse, throw some SQL at the problem. So we innovated on AI through a semantic layer. We innovated on AI through predictive analytics, customer lifetime value, next best action, event propensity, and so on. And then more recently, culminating a launch we did earlier this year of AmpAI, which sort of composes together a whole bunch of different AI capabilities, including sort of the up-to-date versions of some of our original innovations that have been kind of built to the scale of today, as well as some of our newer capabilities around conversational AIs and AI assistants and GPTs to do visualizations and drive improvements in user experience. And I mention all that because if you want to solve hard and interesting problems at scale, data's not enough. You need data and AI, right? And it says it on the podium, hard to miss, right? This is the Data and AI Summit. And that's not just a line. Data and AI are sort of the whole conversation. And the whole conversation, the reason people are so excited about it is because it's allowing people to solve bigger problems faster than they used to. And I think it's really important to just indulge in that for a moment and reflect on the fact that this isn't just hype, right? Some of it is just hype. but most of it is an opportunity to do things that would have seemed a little bit far-fetched, even 10 years ago. Can you imagine 10 years ago somebody asking you to solve that billion records and 150 data sources problem? It doesn't really feel very possible, but 10 years of AI evolution, 10 years of improvement in the underlying platforms have enabled that. And I want to focus in on one really important component of this evolution in the core platforms, and that is open data sharing. It is our belief at Amperity that open data sharing is a very critical part of bringing data and AI together. And that might seem a little counterintuitive. Well, wait a second, isn't AI innovation sort of all about the models and the LMs and all those sorts of things? Well, sure, yes, but how do you get the data to those systems? And importantly, how do you do it fast? Right? I think that's one of the things that a lot of people miss. It's like, oh, cool, data and AI, we get to do all these new things. But we don't get to sit around and twiddle our thumbs for 3 or 4 or 5 years and experiment around. You got to do it straight away, right? Aaron talked about increased consumer expectations, and the rate of increase in consumer expectations is going up as all of these things proliferate. The whole world changed when ChatGPT came out, not because that was a brand new thing, but it gave accessibility to other people, and all of a sudden, the expectation reset. That first moment somebody did that, their expectation for everything you create also reset at the same time. And so the reason open data sharing is important is because we need to move quickly in the data and AI era. And if you think about it, it's like, okay, yeah, whatever, I'm still not sold. Think about the world without open data sharing, right? Think about how data gets to a system. Let's say you're working with a vendor, they've got a model that they're going to run on your data. Right? So you call the vendor and you say, hey, I've got some data, you've got some AI. Let's put it together. It's the data and AI era. How are we going to do that? And the vendor might say, well, where's your data? And you might say, oh, well, it's in my data warehouse or it's in my data lakehouse. And they'll say, great, can you just take it out of there and send it to us? You'd be like, okay, like how? Like what format, what are the protocols, what should we do? And you're figuring that all out on the fly. And what's happened over the last couple of decades is thousands and thousands and thousands of different answers to that question. Well, I don't know, CSV. We'll just dump it out as a CSV and throw it on our SFTP site. That sounds dumb, but that's how a significant amount of the data moves to AI in the world today. This is still happening today. And so we end up on both sides of that equation as the people with the data and the people with the AI, spending a ton of our time swimming in the incidental complexity of how all this data moves around. Has anybody ever tried to parse a CSV file? Has anyone ever tried to find the standard for CSV? I still haven't found it. I've been working on that problem for a while. And so we just waste all of this time and slow everything down by making a bunch of decisions that we shouldn't have to make, right? And so what open data sharing brings to the party is not just the set of protocols, but the set of standards that allows us to very quickly move. So back to that environment. You've got some data, I've got some AI. Well, if we agree on open data sharing, problem solved, right? Skip all the crap. And so it sounds peripheral, but it's a very important connective piece of glue between these data and AI systems, and it's only going to get more powerful as this concept of open data sharing proliferates. And I think this conference over the next coming days will do a lot to push that forward. Right now, we've got 77% is a stat we pulled of people who have this prioritized, and I think that's going to push a lot closer to 100% in the coming months. So I want to bring that concept back to sort of the customer data context that we're talking about here. And I want to give just a quick history of CDP, and it's almost silly to talk about history and CDP together because CDP is not very old. I mean, practically speaking, we only have to go back 7-8 years to sort of find the beginning of the category. And in the beginning, so long ago, you had one choice, and it was a packaged CDP. And this was better than not having a CDP, but it wasn't ideal. So a packaged CDP was basically a vendor sort of building a full stack, right, and making all the decisions for you. So that vendor might decide, hey, I'm going to build this around a relational database and a bunch of Hadoop stuff, and you didn't really have a say. You didn't really have any control. They made all of the stack decisions, and you crossed your fingers and hoped that they would evolve with the times and build new capabilities, but you were sort of stuck, right? It was a black box. So it wasn't great in terms of the architecture, but on the other hand, packaged CDPs, having 7-8 years of innovation sort of stacked up, had a lot of capabilities, right? So if you had a packaged CDP, maybe it wasn't the architecture that you liked, but you got a lot of features. The feature list was super long. So, pros and cons. More recently, over the past, call it 2-3 years, the industry's kind of been experimenting a little bit. And a lot of these experiments have come under the banner of composable CDP. And the idea of composable CDP was, hey, I don't want to leave all the architectural decisions to all my different vendors. I don't want to have 50 different versions of the architecture that solves my problem. I want control. Right? I want control over my data, both from a governance perspective, but also from an architectural perspective. I don't want to miss, the data and AI revolution. And so composable CDP was really built around this idea that I'm going to take control and I'm going to put my data layer in the center, right? Data warehouse, data lakehouse, that's kind of the foundational decision. And everything's going to be built around that. And so in this model, I sort of get that control, I get the architecture that I want, but it comes with some pretty severe trade-offs, right? Now I've got all these little boxes of things that I've got to compose together and orchestrate. It becomes pretty messy to manage. A lot of those might come from different vendors or random GitHub projects, and it's really difficult to maintain all that together, right? In the old days, that was sort of the packaged CDP vendor's problem, and now it's my problem. So I got the architecture, but I've inherited some of the complexity around that. And perhaps even worse, all those boxes around that data layer in the center sort of have to assume lowest common denominator. So you might have a really sophisticated data lakehouse with all these data and AI capabilities, but those vendors have to target people who are putting a data warehouse in the center, which means the vast majority of these things that sit around the center basically just run SQL queries. And so I refer to this as an experimentation era because I think we learned that, hey, it is good to have control. It's good to have this unified architecture, but yikes, it's pretty messy to put all those pieces together. And a lot of the things end up being kind of demos or toys because we can't solve real at-scale AI problems with them. And so, at Amperity, we said, look, we want kind of the benefits of packaged CDPs and the benefits of composable CDPs. We want that architectural control. And open data sharing creates a really important unlock for that. And so about this time last year, leaving the Data and AI Summit at this very place, we sort of asked ourselves the question, what can we do that's new here? How can we get the best of both worlds? We were looking around the corner and we thought, hey, data sharing is going to be a big thing. And I think we guessed right on that one. And so fortunately, the work we've done over the last year has culminated in this moment where we're introducing the Lakehouse CDP. And so this is something new. It's not a packaged CDP. It's not really a composable CDP. It pulls from both of those, right? We're aimed at creating really rich capability, really leveraging AI, and solving the hard version of the problem. That I have 150 different data sets version of the problem, not that I have 2 or 3. And so, Lakehouse and CDP sort of come together. Lakehouse is the architecture we agree on. It's built around open data sharing, so you have control as the data owner in how the CDP and how other things in the ecosystem fit around that, right? So it's sort of composable by nature, but you can bring more capability because you're not limited by all those constraints of sort of the demoware of the composable CDP era. So you can do real identity resolution at scale. You can do a customer 360. This goes beyond just your core customer data. This also includes all the interactions and transactions, all the things that they're actually doing. You can sync data to any tool. Right now, we do that with this kind of janky thing called reverse ETL, right? And if you think about that agreement we talked about earlier between data provider and AI vendor, we had to agree on all these protocols to get the data into the system to run the AI in the first place. Well, reverse ETL is sort of the reverse of that problem. And again, we've got hundreds of different systems that we connect to, and they all have these boutique approaches. It's just all incidental complexity. I invented some API, and I invented some way to implement that API, and now all of the issues with my API are now your problem, and everyone else's problem as well. And so I think as we evolve, and again, back to this concept of open data sharing, reverse ETL should become less and less necessary, but that's no time soon because there's a whole lot of legacy systems that we need to get to in order to touch the customer. And so that's a key part of how CDPs bring value today. And my hope is that it'll become a smaller part of the value they provide over time because open data sharing will just really make that problem a lot easier. And then keeping the data secure and flowing. This is really important. I think nobody puts governance at the top of their priority list when they're shopping for a CDP, but more people should, because a CDP sits in between a bunch of systems that collect data from the customer and take action on that data. And the cost of getting that wrong is pretty impactful to customer experience. And so having a governance layer, being able to do configuration management and being able to test changes in a coherent way in sandboxes, we think is critically important for a Lakehouse to matter. And so the way we built Lakehouse CDP is we re-architected the core of our platform to be truly Lakehouse native. So all of the underlying formats, all the ways data moves, all of the assumptions are sort of consistent with the ideal of a Lakehouse. If you go back a few years and read the Lakehouse paper, that would describe Amperity's core architecture, and so we sort of did the replumbing there. And then on top of that, we created a layer called Amperity Bridge. And this is sort of the open data sharing layer. So the underlying system is fully Lakehouse native. All the data formats and all the protocols underlying that are Lakehouse native. And then Amperity Bridge provides connectivity to wherever that data needs to go. This is bidirectional. So again, in both directions, no CSVs, no SFTPs. We just use data sharing. And most commonly, we're using Delta sharing. As part of this, in fact, we built an open source Delta sharing client. And so if you're looking to add open data sharing as part of your stack, take a look at the Delta sharing GitHub, and you'll find a link to our project there. Today, it's the most comprehensive Delta sharing client in the ecosystem, and we're excited for other people to catch up on that as well. So, a lot of abstract concepts here. I'd love to spend a moment and show you what this looks like in practice. You can just kind of get a feel. I love using Bridge because when I do it, and I'm a technology guy, I know how it works, but nonetheless, it feels really magical, right? The data just sort of shows up, and I've got so many scars from all of that aforementioned incidental complexity that it's just really, it's really exciting. So I'm gonna show a super quick demo, and we're gonna start in the Lakehouse, right? So, imagine, you've just landed a bunch of data that pertains to customer. You've got it organized kind of in this bronze catalog here, organized into a few different data sources. And so we'll zoom in here so you can see a little bit better. We have an e-commerce database, we have a loyalty database, a point of sale data. How that got into this system, we don't need to worry too much about. So it's sitting in here, and we want to make it available to the Lakehouse CDP. So here we go, and we create a share. And you can see each of these three databases we've sort of organized under this Amperity share. We generate a credential file, and now we're in Amperity. We click Add Bridge. This is all there is to it. Name it, and then we take that credential file that got generated by the Delta share, and we just upload it. Literally click a button, upload the credentials, and then that's all it needs to go and enumerate that catalog. So we see the Delta share. It's named exactly as you'd expect, and we can very quickly confirm that all of the tables under all of these different data sources. This is 3, not 150, but it's an illustrative example. So we're just going to grab everything, select all. It's always best to select all. It's faster. Save it, and at this point, Bridge has sort of done its magic, and this data is now available as part of Amperity. And so if we click in to one of the data sources, you can see this is full fidelity. I've got all the data types, all the field names, and I didn't need to parse any CSVs. I can look, I have access to the underlying data. I can efficiently just grab the first few rows. I don't have to copy everything over. It's really exciting. And so through the magic of television, now that we have access to this data in the CDP, I'm going to turn this into a customer 360. Voila. And so now I've taken those three data sources, pulled them together, and consolidated down. So now if I look at the example view, I've got this Amperity ID, which sort of is the customer's identifier across those different resources. So I've got the profile, I've got the interactions, everything's tagged back to that Amperity ID. I can look at the cluster graph. You can see here I've transitively connected these three different records across a couple of different systems, and that also works across 150 systems. The graphs get pretty cool. And then, once you have that customer 360, the next thing obviously you want to do is share it back, right? Again, bidirectional data sharing. So all we need to do is create an outbound share. Same process in reverse, right? I simply click Add Bridge. In this case, I'm creating the Delta sharing from the Lakehouse CDP side instead of before when I was doing it from the Delta sharing in, but it's the exact same sequence of steps. I'm going to select what I'm going to share here. I'm going to select all of the tables in the Customer 360 database, which includes the customer data as well as all those transactions. I download a credential file. This should sound familiar at this point. And then in the Databricks UI, it's way down at the bottom of the screen, but I promise the button is there. There's a button where you can click to simply upload that credential file, and then voila, you see there in shared the data coming from that share named Amperity. You see the Customer 360 database. There's all the tables there. It's just like magic. And so it's reading directly. There's no copying of the data. There's no redundancy. That data, again, because it's a Lakehouse native format, is stored in Amperity in the format that's needed to query. And of course, I can do anything I want with that data. Anything that you can do in Databricks, I can do. I can create a notebook and run a simple query here. But at this point, there's sort of no limit to what you can do. And so, I would encourage you all to imagine if I had that customer 360, whether that's bringing together 3 data sources, 150, or something in between, what could I do in Databricks? Like, it's pretty exciting to think about all the things that we could do. And I think that's really the role of the CDP and the Lakehouse CDP. We get the data right. We solve that really hard domain-specific problem, and we get that data back to you as efficiently as possible so you can innovate on top. And whether that's innovation around AI or customer experience or all of the above, I hope it's all of the above, we're just trying to make that easier. And we think Lakehouse CDP is the right way to do that, and we really believe and hope that the whole industry, CDP and beyond, will continue to adopt these open data sharing protocols. Because if they do, our progress in the data and AI era is going to be way, way faster, and we're going to waste a lot less time. We have a quick pilot, just to plug if this is interesting to you. We'll make it simple. Email Databricks@amperity.com. We've created a kind of limited pilot program for folks here, and so we have a limited number of spots. And so if that's interesting to you, shoot us a note, and we'd love to show you that we can do this on your data, and we can do it very, very quickly. With that, I want to invite Aaron back on the stage. I talked about what you can do when there's a Customer 360, and I'd love for Aaron to share some of the things that General Motors is doing.
Thank you. Let's get my mic back on. Thank you so much for figuring all this out, Simon. Just to kind of close here, so we wanted to share the capability, and there's a lot of just goodness and richness that's there. And very quickly you see the scale that you can drive to. I mentioned the 150 data feeds sort of driving to that. 150 data files sort of driving to that 13 data feeds. That's millions of customers. That's billions of attributes, right? How do you make sense of that? How do you unlock value from that? So, an example I want to give you here, and this is a very fast unlock value. I think within the last 90 days we were able to do this. But by being able to look across our ecosystem and say, this customer might exist in one or multiple places, we're actually able to tease out a nice finding for the loyalty team and take action on it. So we have a loyalty program. It's called My GM Rewards. It's free to join. You can earn points for swag or other goodness there. And if you're spending with us on a regular basis, you get for every $1 you spend, you get 3 points. What we're actually able to do and see across this data set was that our loyalty program did not include a pretty strong portion of our OnStar subscription and safety services customers. So actually, they're just missing out on some goodness that they could get as part of their spend with us. The inverse of this is also true, right? The goodness we could actually receive back by understanding their loyalty, the experiences that drive importance to them, and how we could actually interact with them on a different level. So we easily created kind of a free way in which they could, with the right terms and conditions, interact with that population set to sort of bring them into the fold from a different loyalty perspective. This was not something we were actually able to do before, but it's something that very quickly sort of popped within a matter of a couple of weeks based upon leveraging what we saw earlier for Delta Share. Some other benefits here that we've identified, we saw mislabeled customers, we saw multiple accounts or a business account that was identified as an individual consumer. Actually, was able to clean that up so that the fleet team wasn't also sending an email that might have actually hit a customer, and we create duplication there. I think the last thing here is you think through the hyper-targeted nature that we are trying to drive is household identification and really understanding when there's multiple accounts and how you want to interact with and touch household identification as a reduced opportunity for consumer reach. So as we sort of conclude here, I see there's about 3 minutes left. First I want to just thank Amperity. Databricks is here, Azure. There's many of you. Great partnerships across this work. I also want to thank the team who's not here. We bring these things to life. We win as a team. There's folks, so many I can't name, Brian, Shelley, Asa, Bree, Steve, many others who aren't here today, but are part of bringing this situation to life. And when you think about, and I think Joe Rice said it recently in a podcast or something, you don't get many at-bats sometimes with a business stakeholder. They want to see value right away. And so by being able to say, we understand the data, we define the insight, we're on to activation, you're bringing richness of value. And I hope that you're able to see some of that value that's here. But obviously, just as a TLDR here, through this work, there's a lot that we can do next, right? It's continued growth through customer-centric products. It's the opportunity that we have to think about personalization in a really unique way with relevant offers and communications and recommendations that are really near real time related to how we capture the data thanks to the richness we have with a single ID that's meaningful. And then lastly, all of these things kind of get written back to our consumer data hub. So clickstream experiences, for example, being able to actually understand what's actually happening in those experiences and making richer experiences are part of how we think, again, about that product orientation, that consumer centricity that lives inside of it, and data driving our experiences. So,
thanks, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, all.